All right, good morning, Pittsburgh Unified School District parents and families. Thank you so much for joining me this morning for our parent workshop on coping with grief and loss. Before we get started, I want to let you know that Spanish translation is available. Muy buenos días, gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana para nuestro taller sobre manejando la pérdida y el pesar. Si gusta escuchar la presentación en español, por favor seleccione la pequeña imagen en la parte de abajo de su pantalla que parece un globo pequeño y dice interpretación. Si está accediendo al taller por medio de su celular, tal vez tenga que seleccionar donde ve 3 puntitos y diga more o más para seleccionar interpretación en español. Thank you. So thank you again for joining us this morning. This session is being recorded. My name is Leticia Preciado, and I'm the Parent Engagement Coordinator here in Pittsburgh Unified School District. Thank you for joining us for our parent workshop on coping with grief and loss. Joining me this morning doing our translation is Ms. Maria Gomez, and doing this morning's presentation is our district nurse, Raquel Torres, and her team. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to District Nurse Torres, and she'll introduce her team. Welcome, Nurse Torres.
Thank you, Leticia. Good morning, everybody. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us this morning. I have a great group of nurses here that will be doing a wonderful presentation for you on coping with grief and loss, how to talk with your children about it, and some good coping strategies for yourselves. So without further ado, here we go.
Hello, my name is Heather, and I'm one of the nursing interns with the Pittsburgh Unified School District. This is our presentation on coping with grief and loss. How do I advance it? So, what is grief? The American Psychological Association defines grief as the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. To start this presentation off, I wanted to share with you a quote that I found from speakinggrief.org that I thought did a really good job of breaking down what grief is. So grief is a set of experiences that involves the feelings of loss that someone has in a situation, an event, a happening, and the way that they physically, emotionally, and spiritually respond to the world around them. So if we're thinking about technical difficulties. If we're thinking about the way that grief is, that we're taught that it's just a death event, a death of a loved one, but it actually encompasses a series of losses and series of change that has to do with how we blend that change into our day-to-day functioning. So when we grieve not only the loss, but the future we could have had. Often we reminisce over the things that could have been, and those little moments are themselves important part of the series of losses that stem from that original loss. We have to take those losses and find a way to sit with them. Grief is different from bereavement and mourning. Bereavement is a term that they use to talk about the period after a loss during which grief and mourning happens. And mourning is the process by which people adapt to loss. So grief is normal and a natural experience to loss. It's a very individual experience, sometimes without public expression, and it's shaped by many things, such as the relationship we had with the person who died, or the situation that we experienced loss, the cause of death. Traumatic deaths or the deaths of children hit us differently than a death that maybe we were expecting, or that was kind of an inevitable death. Society and cultural backgrounds play a part in how our grief is shaped, personality and coping styles, past experiences with our loss will also kind of shape how we handle loss and grief. The support networks we have and religious or spiritual beliefs and customs. I also liked that the American Psychological Association mentioned that grief may also take the form of regret for something lost, remorse for something done, or sorrow for a mishap to oneself. All right, so this is a short video that myself and my colleagues found that thought captured a good definition of grief that's presented in a way for children to understand. It keeps it simple. It acknowledges kids and their big feelings, and it really explains the reactions that they might see in the people around them.
Have you ever wondered, what is grief? Grief is our reaction when someone we love dies. You might feel sad or angry, confused or scared. No matter how you feel, it's okay. You're not alone. If your feelings ever get too big or there are too many, be sure to tell an adult you trust. Did you know that grief can even make you feel physically sick? You might get a stomachache or a headache or even have trouble sleeping. After someone dies, some of us want to be alone and we avoid spending time with our friends and family. Others of us might not want to ever be alone, so we seek out our friends and family for comfort. Sometimes we might find ourselves getting easily distracted or crying on and off throughout the day. Some of us try to hide our grief so that we don't make our friends uncomfortable. Sometimes we might feel guilty for the death. Guilt is the feeling that something we said, thought, or felt caused the death. It's important to know that it's not your fault that your loved one died. Lastly, grief is ongoing. Sometimes a place, memory, sound, or smell can cause those physical or emotional reactions. A year from now, you may be feeling fine when your loved one's favorite song comes on the radio. Hearing that song may make you feel sad or angry again, but this is normal and it will go away, so don't worry. Have you ever wondered, what is grief?
All right, so grief affects your body and your brain. The stress with dealing with the loss of a loved one or just a loss in general is going to take a toll on our bodies and our minds. When we're stressed out, our bodies activate and release a stress hormone, and those hormones can stay in our bodies at elevated levels for up to 6 months when we're processing loss. This hormone can cause forgetfulness or problems with memory and recall, confusion. You can have difficulty completing tasks or concentrating. Sometimes the time just like flies by. You have like that altered perception of time, difficulty processing information. I know that when I'm grieving or experiencing loss, I have a really hard time when people are trying to explain things to me. There also can be changes in sleep patterns. You can have insomnia, which is like when you can't get to sleep. Some people will have recurrent nightmares. You can have headaches or really intense migraines. Changes in your appetite or just like stomach aches, not feeling well, digestive issues. It also will change how your energy levels work. You can be really fatigued, just not feel yourself. It can also cause back, joint, and muscle pain. And then one of the things that I didn't include on this slide is it actually does increase your heart rate and it can mess with your blood pressure as well. So what is coping? It's the use of mental and behavioral strategies to reduce negative emotions and conflict caused by stress. So it's those things that we do that when we're stressed to try and relieve that pressure that is on us. whether that's reminiscing and sharing memories, journaling, exercise, or just forcing ourselves to go outside, creating some sort of creative expression like art. Just something that, kind of gives you a little bit of joy. There's another type of coping. It's very important in the early stages of grief. It's grief avoidance. It's a way that people just kind of avoid that situation that's causing the grief or loss. And it actually helps us give time to process our feelings. The problem becomes if we use this too heavily, it can actually cause our grief and turn it into a serious problem called complicated grief. Complicated grief is a condition characterized by recurrent distressing emotions, disbelief, avoidance of reminders, and intrusive thoughts about the loss of a loved one. It can look very similar to major depressive disorder, and approximately 7% of bereaved adults will have this condition, and it causes enough distress where it's interfering with their daily lives. Grief can be really uncomfortable and awkward for people to talk about. Talking about loss and grief is a type of taboo in our society, and people often will try and change the subject or find a silver lining regarding a loss instead of sitting with that discomfort. Sometimes we don't know what to say, and it's okay to just kind of sit with people when they're grieving. I have listed some resources that are local to Pittsburgh for grief that can help at the end of this presentation. But when do you need to seek help with your grief? If you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having issues where you're just not hungry, you have a loss of appetite over a long period of time, you're losing a lot of weight, when you're feeling hopeless or worthless, when you just can't seem to focus on anything but the past, you're neglecting yourself or things in your life, when you're feeling like you're unable to do your regular activities for months to years after your initial loss, or if you're having suicidal thoughts. So now I'm going to introduce Maritza, and she's going to go over the 5 stages of grief.
Hi everyone, my name is Maritza. I'm also a nurse intern. Now I'm going to be talking about the 5 stages of grief. So a lot of us are familiar with the stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. However, when someone is grieving, that process is not a linear experience for everyone, especially not for kids. Children tend to display their emotions very differently than adults do. So a lot of the time when children are grieving, the grief loss of a loved one goes unnoticed. So I'll be talking a little bit of what children go through when they grieve. So before I go over the stages of grief in children, I'm going to talk about common grief myths. So the first myth is that grief happens in stages. Like I just explained, every person grieves in their unique way, and it really depends on internal and external factors. For example, internal factors can be emotional and psychological factors, and the external factors can be support systems such as family and friends, or any community support that people might have. Myth number 2 is that time heals all wounds. The truth is that grief has no timeline. This doesn't mean that the intensity of the experience will last forever. Instead, just think about grief as something that will evolve over time and become more manageable and less intense if you have the support, like I said before, of family, friends, and your community. Another myth is the goal for grieving is closure. Grief is actually a lifelong process, and then it can appear in cycles and present itself intensely even years after death. So if there's something that reminds you of the person, it can be an item or a place, it can just trigger you to grieve all over again. Myth number 4, that kids don't grieve. And a lot of people believe that since kids don't understand what grief is, that they don't go through this process. However, all kids grieve starting at birth. A child will grieve the death of a parent. Grief for kids is emotional, intellectual, social, and physical. A child's level of understanding of death, as well as their needs, will vary depending on their age. For example, an infant, when their parent passes away, they won't understand that the person is gone, and they won't understand that the person is not coming back. However, they will still grieve. They will miss like the scent of the person or the schedule that they used to have with that person. So that will be their way of grieving. When we talk about a 4 or 5 year old, the way that they will grieve is a little differently too. They will understand that the person has died, but they might not understand that it's something permanent. So the older the child is, the more that they will understand, and they will grieve differently. Okay, myth number 5 is that kids can't handle grief. The fact is that children need honesty to better understand what is happening when someone dies. Giving our kids the time, attention, and the tools to help them process their grief will empower them to develop healthy coping skills that will help them build resilience today and in the future. So now that I went over the myths, I'm just going to go through the stages of grief that you will see in children. There are different levels of understanding. So pretty much what I just talked about, that depending on the age and the understanding of the child, that's how they will grieve. So some adults wrongly assume that young children do not comprehend death. While some young children may not understand the permanence of death, their level of understanding grows as they age. So pretty much like the example that I went over, an infant might not understand that the parent is gone, but they will miss the routine, they will miss the scent. 5-year-old will understand that the person has passed away, but they won't understand that it's permanent. A 6-year-old and older, they start understanding about the permanent, like it's permanent, the person has passed away and they're not coming back. However, they will start having emotions. They will start experiencing grief, and they will start displaying grief with different behaviors, such as they will develop fear, guilt, and sometimes they will blame themselves. And then when we're talking about children 13 years and older, they completely understand what death is, and they begin to worry about themselves and that it might happen to them as well. And they start to question their religion, they start questioning their beliefs, even doctors. And so then I'm just gonna go over another phase, like reactive behaviors. So as children are affected by death, it can alter their behavior. Often negative words and actions are misdirected, which is how children grieve. Their grief can go unnoticed. And at any age, aggression can occur. However, as children get older, acting out becomes common while grieving, whether it's in school, at home, or with friends. It is crucial to identify out of character behaviors and address them, why it's happening, and present alternative methods of cope. Grief behavior includes being the golden child. So it doesn't mean that because a child is not acting out that they're not grieving. They're also grieving. And it's very important for parents to be able to identify the behavior and address it quickly so it doesn't get worse. So for example, other behaviors that you can see in a child. So if a child has already been potty trained, you can start noticing that the child is starting to have accidents here and there. Other things that you can notice is a toddler might start wanting to revert, start acting out like a baby talk. So those are some of the behaviors. So it's important to understand that many children grieve, and the way that we can identify it is through their behavior. Okay, so every child that is grieving has needs. As a child's caregiver or supportive adult relationship, it's vital to encourage healthy coping methods. So some things that we can do with our children is always be honest when answering questions about death to your child. Help your child find proactive ways to express their feelings. And these can be like through grief programs, art, writing. Also be able to reassure your child, validate, and listen to their feelings. And then just continue the emotional support and encouragement. And then I have this video that talks about how a child, like death and grieving and bereavement through a child's eyes. It's pretty much what I explained. And I thought it was a really good video showing what I just talked about. So it's a good example for everyone to see.
Talking to children when they are about to be bereaved or have just experienced a death may feel daunting. Knowing how children of different ages may react can help. Listen to these views from children who have been bereaved in real life.
I found it hard to know what I was supposed to do when I saw my mum. Maybe the doctor could have helped me to know where her body was hurting and where we needed to be careful if we touched her. Even my little brother, who was 6, wanted to know what was happening. He could tell that Mum wasn't well. It would have helped if someone we trusted had said what was going on in simple words, and that she might die.
Grown-ups who have to tell us that someone has died should make sure they use the word dead, and should make sure that we know what that means. They could say, "I'm sorry, but your mummy's heart has stopped working and it won't start working again. That means that she's died." Being dead means that your body and your head won't work anymore. Mummy can't talk, or see, or hear, or eat, or move, or feel anything anymore.
Most primary school age children understand the difference between people who are alive and people who are dead. Even though they're often good at saying or showing how they're feeling, they might hide it and look like they're not affected. Help parents include their children in events around the time of death and let them ask questions. Remember that they're starting to understand that everybody dies, including themselves and other members of their family. This can be a very scary thing to come to terms with.
I was really upset that I didn't get to see her when she was dying. I wanted to be given the choice. I think it would have helped to have had someone encourage my family to talk about it. To say that this is always going to hurt and this is one time they can't stop us hurting, but at least we can share our feelings together. It's much harder for us if we're not included.
Through adolescence, teenagers who are bereaved will be increasingly aware of the impact of a death in their lives. They may challenge the beliefs and explanations given by others. They might prefer talking to friends, or they might withdraw or get angry. If all their questions are not answered, they're likely to look things up online, which may well be more upsetting. Very small children have heard about people dying, but they may see death as temporary, so they can get confused and think that people might be able to come back. Avoid euphemisms like lost or passed away. Reassure them that it wasn't anything that they said, thought, or did that caused the person to die. Be honest with them about the cause of death, even if it's very traumatic. However old they are, find a way to tell them that is suitable for their age and understanding. Give them the choice whether to see the person who has died. And tell them ahead what it's going to be like in the room and what the body will look and feel like. If you tell them that it'll look like Daddy's asleep, Remember to say that it's not like when we're sleeping, because we can wake up. Babies don't have the language to express their loss, but will notice when someone's gone. They will miss their voice and smell and can pick up on grief around them. They can also sense when their routine has changed. Encourage those looking after babies to minimize changes and to help build memories of the person who has died. As a healthcare professional, there are many ways for you to help families, friends, schools, and communities do and say things before and after someone dies that will help children cope with their loss. About a third of children will need some professional help to deal with bereavement, but most of them will get by with the support of their family. The way children experience death can affect how they'll deal with it later on in life. Even if you're busy, find a way to include them. Be open and honest. Listen and answer their questions. If they understand what happened and know that the death wasn't their fault, they'll be better equipped to deal with their grief in the future as they find their new normal.
Okay, and then now I'm just going to pass it down to Natasha.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha, and I'm a student intern with Cal State East Bay. And I must say ahead of time that if you are experiencing any grief or loss, that I hope that this presentation helps you in any type of way. My colleagues, classmates, and I, this was pretty challenging to do. So I hope that you find something out of this presentation that could support you during this time. So the subject that I will be talking about is handling grief as a parent. Grief alone is tough, let alone being a parent and having to deal with or help your child process different emotions and feelings during this challenging time. So when addressing grief to a child, it's very important to be specific and age appropriate. For example, if your child is a 3-year-old and their grandmother just passed away, it's okay to say grandma has died. Then they could understand it a little better. Listening to that child and providing support as well, giving that child that pause and that time for them to actually explain or even present their feelings is very important. And when speaking with them, that child, as Maritza had mentioned, children tend to express their feelings and emotions through their behavior. So trying to work with them so they can put words to those feelings and emotions. Karina, who is coming after me, will give you more of an example of those type of words that will be great as a parent to say to a child. During grief and loss, a lot of things will be changing and shifting. So preparing that child also age appropriately to the different events that will change and that are coming. So they would experience less of a shock. Trying your best to stick to routines. During going through grief and experiencing a loss is challenging, and I know routines are challenging as well, but trying your best to stick to them will be great for your child to adapt. If it's appropriate, having your child, especially if it's a loss of a close family member, and depending on the level of that loss as well, according to your cultural beliefs, your religion, having that child play a part in that burial or funeral process will be great. And of course, again, this will be age appropriate. If your child is in high school and they're okay with it, maybe being a pallbearer, giving them that importance and in transitioning into another stage of the grief process. Help your child by remembering that person. And examples of that would be if that person loved to bake, then baking that person's favorite cake or whatever it is, like a cookie with that child, and experiencing that with them. So this will help them connect happy memories to that loss instead of just focusing on the loss of that person, but also so much of what that person has given to that child and your family. Provide comfort and continue to reassure them. And this you would continue intermittently or continuously throughout the process. And that's whichever way that is that works for your family. And that could be just snuggling up in a blanket or talking to them, going for a walk, whatever is the best way that your child receives comfort, finding that zone to be able to deliver that to them. Providing space and time for that child to heal. As parents, it's so hard to see our children hurting. And we want to sometimes overbear them and feel like that the more that we're around them, we're comforting them, but also we can be smothering them. So giving that time with themselves, of course, still age appropriate, so they can process their own feelings and this entire process. Discuss your family belief systems during this trying time, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, Catholic, whatever your belief system is, this will be a great time in instilling that into your child and those values and your process of applying that during a grief and a loss. Also as a parent, because we're always worried about our children, give yourself that time and that space to heal. You are just as important. And I like to use the example of as if you were on an airplane and you are, you're running out of oxygen. You need to give yourself oxygen first, and then you can be there to properly apply that oxygen mask to your child and support them. And that's a great example of the grief process is you have to feed and take care of yourself so you can be there to support and properly take care of your child during this trying time. This video that I have is similar to, well, it kind of piggybacks on what Maritza has showed you guys. However, this is more of an interview setting and children expressing how they feel during the grief process and what they wish adults would have done. I'm gonna play it. I hope you enjoy it.
Out at YGS, grief, and how it affects them. Y'all know why we're here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sure. My dad, his name was Robert.
My dad, his name was David.
My mom.
What was her name?
Her name was Catherine. My mom, her name was Stacy.
What was Stacy like?
She liked to give hugs a lot. Like she had this shirt that said free hugs and hug dealer.
He would give bear hugs and squeeze you really tight.
He loves hugs.
Yeah. A lot of hugs, huh?
Kind of a normal parent thing.
When you talk about this, how does it make you feel?
Kind of tense and like sad because it's hard thinking about them. Happy and sad because it's happy that you get to know them and have time with them, and then it's sad that they go away when you're young.
Have you noticed people treat you differently after your mom or dad died?
Sometimes, like, they're so worried about me, they ask about my parents, and I'm mad about that, but sometimes they're just comforting and then they're kind.
I feel like sometimes, like at first, they were really nice to me and considerate, and then I feel like it kind of washed away.
Do you want them to say, I'm sorry?
Not really, because it just makes me feel even worse. Because then I feel like they're apologizing for nothing, because it wasn't their fault. It makes me feel uncomfortable, but I'd prefer them to say I'm sorry for your loss or something like that.
Do you think that we treat kids differently when they're grieving, or we just don't know what to say to you?
Most adults don't know what to say. Most of them don't talk about it and they're more like in different subjects rather than talking about that subject.
Sometimes, do you think, like when adults are trying so hard to not talk about it, you can tell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
You can feel it.
Yeah. Like when my dad just is like trying to avoid it, I can tell.
What do you wish grown-ups knew about what you're going through?
Well, I kind of wish that they would like help me more, because they just like expect the best out of me, but it's kind of hard to do that all the time.
They should learn how to recognize when I feel like I need more space or when I need to be comforted.
And it's okay to talk about this stuff or not talk about it, right? And maybe just, we'll take your lead, your people too. You get to decide when you want to talk about it. Sound like a deal?
Yeah.
Thanks for talking to me. Out at Y.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that video. The next topic that I'm going to talk about is us as parents, you the parents, during this time, and how you can provide self-care to yourself. And this also varies according to your background, your culture, your beliefs, whatever feels good to you. That can be considered self-care, whether sometimes being alone, especially if you're from a collectivism society, you want to be around family, and that's okay. That can be defined as self-care. You are the author of how you feel. Acknowledging your own feelings and allowing yourself to feel those. As Heather mentioned, like sometimes we have avoidance, like we don't want to feel those emotions, and then they can present themselves in a different way. So allowing yourself those times within comfort to feel those emotions and process through them. Ask for help. Sometimes it's really hard to, especially as an adult, to ask for help. And sometimes it's seen as weakness, but asking for help displays a great amount of strength. So use your resources and reach out to the people that are close to you, that you love. Do something that makes you feel good and that promotes inner joy. If you enjoy being outside and the wind on your face, then you can go and do that. If you want to be in nature, go and do that. Be kind to yourself and nurture yourself just as you would do your child or someone else. Call a friend and express your feelings and emotions to that person. That's another form of release and attending to yourself. Do not set a timeline. Like Maritza said, grief, as time goes on, it may get better, but it comes back up, and that's okay. And you be kind to yourself, and you allow yourself to feel those emotions and process that stage, whichever stage you may be in, and don't give yourself a time limit. Try your best to get enough sleep. Heather talked about insomnia, and it may be really challenging to get enough sleep at this time, but trying your best and doing different remedies, like having a bedtime routine that gets your mind a little settled and into that process of getting some sleep. Also developing a routine to maintain as much as possible, just as you would do with your child. You also can have that routine that will best suit all of you guys, your entire family. Try your best to eat a balanced diet. Don't be so hard on yourself. Do something that will nourish and comfort yourself, that is not so much out of the ordinary, so it doesn't feel like it's extra work and it adds stress during this difficult time. Get out in the sun and in the nature. Sometimes it may be challenging to get out of the house, but when you're actually there, it feels really good, and that's a great form of self-care. Bathe and maintain appropriate hygiene. A lot of times when you're experiencing grief and loss, You don't want to take care of yourself. You don't want to get out of bed, but making that a point that even if that's the only thing you do, that you get up and you take a shower, you do appropriate hygiene that makes you feel comfortable, and do that on a routine during this challenging time. Joining a support group during this time and a lot of hard times in our life, we often feel like we're alone. We feel like we're the only person that are feeling these emotions, and there's no one else that can completely understand what you're going through. And that's not always the case. There's plenty of support groups, and Heather's going to provide you with some information at the end of this presentation so you can reach out and get support through a support group if you need, as well as seeking professional help. If all of these self-care routines you feel like are ineffective, or even in addition to these self-care routines, you feel like you need additional help, you can contact your primary care provider, and so you can seek additional help to bring you and your family through these challenging times. This video that I have will also give you examples of different ways that you can do self-care. Okay, I hope you enjoy it.
Number 1, walk outside. Studies have shown that people who live closer to nature have reduced blood pressure and stress overall. So walk outside, and you don't even have to walk, just go outside, sit in nature, just be sure that you are surrounded by greenery. Number 2, call a friend. The number one way that people who are grieving say helps them cope is being surrounded by friends and family. That does not have to mean a physical presence. Just go ahead, pick up the phone, call someone, or text if that's what you prefer. Either way, ask them if you can vent, or if you don't feel like talking, have them tell you about their day. Number 3, listen to music. Music can be helpful and healing for so many people. Whether you are just grabbing your phone and turning Spotify on, or maybe you have a record player and you can turn something on, just lay in your house listening to anything that you like. Some people like classical music during this. Other people like angry music to let their emotions out. Whatever it is you feel, go for it. Number 4, write in a journal. Writing and journaling are tried and true grief tactics that help so many people. Some people like to journal to their loved one who has passed, or some people like to just get the thoughts out of their head and on a piece of paper, reading them back to themselves later in a little bit more of an objective light as a way to be a little bit kinder to yourself. Whatever it is that you do, go ahead, pick up that pen and that piece of paper and just start writing. Number 5, go for a bike ride. Bike ride! This one is super similar to the very first self-care option we talked about, which is just get outside. But this time you are moving a little bit faster. You can go further. This can just kind of help take your mind off of things. You can even listen to music while you do this. It's also just really great for you and getting some of that, stuck emotion in your body out. Number 6, take a bath. A lot of folks like to pamper themselves as a way of self-care, but spas can be really expensive and some people don't want to be surrounded by other people. So a really great way to pamper yourself without those caveats is taking a bath at home using some soaker salt or good smells, whatever it is that you really like. Go ahead and sit in that bath for 30 minutes, repeating to yourself, I am here and I am okay, and let that emotion just kind of wash off. Number 7, pet something furry. No, God. Number 7, pet a pet. Small furry creatures with their big old eyes just spark something nurturing and primal within us. So if you have a pet or if you have friends that have dogs or cats, offer to watch them for a little bit or even just head on over to their place and cuddle with them. It will give you some of those warm fuzzies that you might be needing right now. Number 8, read or watch something funny. You are already grieving. You are in the depths of some of the darkest emotions out there.
go ahead and gift yourself the gift of watching something funny. For me, I put The Office on anytime I need to get my mind off of things. For you, it might be another show or movie that kind of feels like home. Maybe you've seen it a million times, but that one part always makes you laugh. Go ahead and make that time for yourself to watch those kind of shows. Number 9, number 1, walk outside. Studies have shown that people.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video. She goes on, and it's a pretty long list. The link will be added to this presentation at the end if you'd like to watch more. I'm going to introduce now my classmate, Karina. She's going to take over.
Hi, my name is Karina. I'm going to go over the interventions when a child is going through grief. The first one I really do want to talk about is increasing self-esteem. Children dealing with death can negatively impact their self-esteem. Lower self-esteem has been linked with greater mental problems. Children shown to have loss of interacting with their loved ones, with their parents, their caregivers, their friends. So it's important for them to have positive talk. When I mean about that is there's negative and positive. With negative is something like, I did something bad, so I deserve it. That is a negative mindset to have. So you would actually want to have a positive one, which is, it is not my fault that something bad is happening. Another way to increase self-esteem is have a child do activities they're good at. When they're doing activities that they're good at, there is less chance of failure, and then this will have them be in a more positive self-esteem. So this can include drawing, playing a sport, coloring, singing, anything that makes sense. The second one would be increasing the child's adaptive control beliefs. Like as stated before, they are having, some children will have a negative mindset of they feel like they can control everything positively and negatively. However, that's not a good mindset to have. One thing that can happen with children who have lost a parent is they might have the responsibility of having the parent's responsibility, and then that's not a good place to be at. There needs to be a line between the parent's responsibility and the child's responsibility. With the children's responsibility, they can do a to-do list or ask support from their friends or families, teachers. That way they can not be stressed about the responsibilities that they are having. Also, another intervention that a child can have is it's called the Focus on Positive Problem Solving Skills, which is 7 steps. So the first one is expect the unexpected. Having this mindset helps with dealing when there are unusual events that happen or things that they might not want to happen. Number 2 is accept the unexpected. Accept the fact that there will be surprises along the way and things may not be controlled. Number 3, stay optimistic. Staying optimistic doesn't mean ignoring the uglier sides of life. It means to be positive as much as possible. With a child that's grieving, just having, their siblings with them, their friends with them, their pets, the other parent, having the optimistic side. Number 4, consult others. If they are having problems, they can consult with family members, teachers, counselors, whoever they feel comfortable with. Number 5, use creative skills and critical thinking skills. In our brain, we have 2 sides. We have the creative side and the critical thinking side. We can use the critical side to analyze the problem, the creative side by creating options, and then analyzing each option to see which one is best for that situation. Number 6, plan for results. See how the solution might look and then work backwards from that result. And number 7, don't give up. With grieving, I know it's hard it's easy to just want to stay at home and not continue with daily tasks, but it's important to continue and not giving up on yourself. It's also another important intervention is parental child communication, using the iMessage as they call them. So with the child, as Natasha was explaining, they can say, I feel blank, I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel upset. And then the second is family members utilizing listening skills when they say those expressions. For us, it's important to use active listening. I know everyone knows about listening, but active listening is actually sitting there and acting like a mirror for them. So it's pretty much restating what the child says. If the child says, I feel sad because I miss dad, you will say, so what I'm hearing is you're sad because you're missing your father. It's also important to not interrupt them while they are talking, and don't ask why, because they can get defensive when they are talking. I have a little video on active listening. This is a good video to show to your children as well.
So let's talk about listening.
That's easy.
We all think we're good listeners, but have you ever done this? Or this? Or this?
Oh dear, I have.
Well, sadly, we all have.
Oh well, if everyone does it, then it can't be that big a deal.
Actually, it is. When we don't listen, we're saying, yeah, what you're saying isn't important.
Oh dear. So, what should I do?
Well, be present and focus when your friend is talking. We call this active listening.
That sounds hard.
Well, the more you do it, the better you become. A great way to practice active listening is to stop.
Like at a stop street?
Not that kind of stop. It stands for stop, breathe, listen, respond. So first you stop what you're doing. And yes, you guessed it. Then you breathe. Now you're ready to listen and...
What if I...
Without interrupting. And we don't just listen with our ears. We listen with our whole body.
My body talks?
You betcha. Look at Jim over here. What do you think his body is communicating to his friend?
He's bored for sure. So how can I not be like Jim?
Well, make sure your eyes are looking straight at the person talking. Your feet are still on the floor. Your mouth is quiet. No talking or making weird sounds.
What's next?
Now you're ready to respond in a kind and patient way. Find out more about the situation, but don't try to solve everything.
But if I can't solve the problem, what can I say?
So say something to encourage them, like, tell me more, or how did that make you feel? Or even, what can I do to help?
So, to be an active listener, I need to stop, breathe, listen, and only then respond?
A+.
Crushed it!
So the next intervention is effective discipline. I understand as a parent, it might be difficult to do disciplining when the child is grieving. However, there are studies that have shown effective discipline can reduce mental health problems. So the three is communicating clear expectations and rules, maintaining the rules and enforcing the rules, and having consequences and delivering when those rules are set. With this, please don't be lenient, because it actually might cause more damage than good. And as a parent, it is important to be calm and consistent when you are implementing these disciplines. And it's important to remember that you are not being mean, but you are being a responsible parent for your child. The next one is increase positivity family interactions. So what I mean by that is just having family fun time with your children. Example is playing in the park, playing a sport, making meals together, playing a video game together. Anything that is going to cause you to interact with your children But nothing like going to the movies and just sitting there or watching TV. You actually want to be interacting with them. And this can actually help increase the child's mood and actually help them open up to you as well, because they're going to start feeling more comfortable. And of course, therapy, it will give the child a safe environment to express their feelings and have someone there to listen to them. So Heather's going to continue with the resources we found for grief and loss.
Hello again. So these resources were the ones that I was able to find local to Pittsburgh, so you don't have to leave the city. The first one I wanted to talk about is there's a meeting on Saturdays at First Baptist Church online. The church is on Odessa Avenue in Pittsburgh. I've included the phone number on this slide, as well as more of the information through the link. They have a support group that just comes together to help people in mourning and loss. There's also the Contra Costa Crisis Center. The link here will take you to their site, but they offer grief counseling and other services related to grief and loss that can help you if you're having a hard time or need to seek outside help. The Pittsburgh Unified School District actually has a really awesome list of resources. I've included the link as well. Some of them are actually almost, they're PDFs that you can download and read, and they're very extensive. They get good examples on how to talk and how to kind of deal with grief and loss. So those are really good resources. And then the Pittsburgh Public Library has a nice selection of books actually in the library. This link takes you to the search that I did through their online database, and it pulls up all of the books that they have on grief and loss. These are just a couple of children's books about death and grieving that could be really good to help introduce those topics if you're finding yourself having a hard time. They kind of give you prompts that can make it a little bit easier. You guys can kind of go off of the characters in the book and use that as a way to kind of see how your child is processing, and then maybe explore grief more with them. And then these are just the references of the stuff that we used to make this presentation for you guys. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for listening in. One thing I wanted to add on here is that loss isn't just death of a person. It could be death of a pet, their fish or their cat or dog. And loss could also be something that is when a parent has to go away for a long time or permanently. So it could be either, if a parent leaves the family, either by choice or by force, or such as incarceration or deportation. So those are other losses that, we all face. It could also be the loss of your community. So if you move to another city or another state, or even just a different neighborhood, and they don't have the same friends anymore, children will view that as a loss, and they will grieve for missing that friend or the playgrounds they used to go to. And sometimes even switching schools. If they had a teacher they really loved, and they're going from 5th grade to 6th grade, it's a whole new environment. There's a loss there too. The comfort of either the elementary school or the middle school, moving up to the next stage of their education could also be a loss and then they will have to grieve that part of either their childhood or that community that they had. And if anyone has questions, you can put them in the Q&A. Leticia has placed the slides for download in English and in Spanish. And yeah. It also looks like there's a survey. If you could please fill that out, it helps us to learn and grow and know how we can serve you all better.